In this video, I'm going to be discussing Ibsen's play A Doll's House, and this video is specifically aimed at students studying the play for their A-level in English literature. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to be talking about some quotes from Act 1. The aims of this video is very simple. We're going to be taking a selection of passages from the first act, analysing them in terms of any techniques, any key words, discussing what makes those particular quotes significant, and also how audiences can interpret the language. And a reminder that if you are studying the play as part of an open book exam, which means you have the book with you in the exam, remember that that gives you the opportunity to quote more liberally, which means that you can find specific textual moments in the play related to an essay question. So it might be that in that exam, you might be talking about some of these extracts in your answer. Just a reminder as well that this is a play in translation, so with each edition, the publisher can translate the play slightly differently. So there are differences in language. This Penguin edition is the edition that I use, and that is the wording from this video that I'll be using. So this is also the edition that my students use. So just bear in mind that even though the plot is of course the same, there may be differences in some of the language in terms of the version that you use. So we're going to start by talking about the beginning of the play, very much at the beginning, when there is this exchange between Helma and Nora. And of course, whenever we're talking about a conversation and we're talking about characters taking turns in the conversation, we can call those adjacency pairs. So in spoken language study and linguistics, adjacency pairs is the turn taking in a conversation, and you can see here that we have quite quick turn taking between Nora and Helma. There's quite a lot to say about this small passage actually. The first is of course he's using the possessive determiner my and the noun sweet tooth, which shows perhaps that Helma believes that Nora is his, and perhaps even further to say that he believes that she is her property. And also it makes her seem quite cute, like a pet. This might be the way in which a parent, for example, might talk to a child. What he's trying to do, of course, through these questions here, is he is trying to get answers as to whether or not she has gone into the confectionery shop or the sweet shop to buy macaroons. And of course she has. She just lies about it. So we can see here, I haven't highlighted them, but you can see that he asks three questions. So we have three interrogatives in this section where he's trying to get to the truth. And usually when characters speak in interrogative sentences, it tells us that they have the power in the conversation and that they are the ones that are steering the discourse. Her replies, which I've highlighted in blue, show that she is lying. And of course, as this play develops, this becomes a home of secrets and lies, and the result of that is it creates quite an oppressive, claustrophobic atmosphere, particularly for Nora. So her short but resolute replies suggest that this is in fact a character that is capable of deception and lying to her husband, who of course in this play represents a powerful force in the domestic sphere of the home. So he may not be a king or a leader of a political party, but he still does represent the hierarchy and the powerful in the domestic sphere of this play. And of course, the fact that she's capable of lying about things like this foreshadows the fact that she's capable of telling lies about other things which might be more serious. Notice in green we've got two verbs, nibbled and gnawed, and both of these words are usually words that you would use to describe the way in which a small animal eats, such as a mouse or a squirrel. So again, continuing with that animalistic theme we see in the first act, he's also using verbs here to make her seem cute, as if she's taking small bites of something. Macaroon, of course, is a type of confectionery sweet, and in this case it's being used as a symbol to show that she is capable of a rebellion. It might be a trivial rebellion and also a trivial form of dissent, but it of course also shows that she is capable of keeping secrets. And in red here, when he has been satisfied that she is telling the truth, he says, well, I'm only joking, of course. And the question is he? And I don't think he is. I think he's just willing to almost trivialize his own questions. He was clearly bothered because he wouldn't have asked so many questions. So I don't think he is joking. He's just satisfied with the answer. And of course, the fact that he's questioning her so closely shows that he represents a sinister, tyrannical presence in this house. Going forward into Act 1, this is a conversation, or part of a conversation, that Nora has with Mrs. Lind, or Mrs. Lindy, as some people pronounce. And she says that, of course, there will be a time when Torvald is not so devoted to me. And we've got this epistrophe. So epistrophe is when you have repetition at the end of sentences, or in this case, at the end of clauses of sentences. So we've got that repetition of for him, or him at the end. Reminding us that this is a role that she is playing for him. So therefore, she almost concedes the fact that she is his plaything and a source of entertainment for him. And of course, it also reminds us that this is quite doll-like, it's quite passive, and it's also a facade, because just because she's doing all of this doesn't mean that she's happy to do all of this. And at this point, you might think about the Tarantella dance, which takes place at the end of Act 2, when she puts on that Tarantella dress and learns that dance routine. Of course, it's for his benefit, really, because he wants the satisfaction of everybody looking at his wife at that party. We've also got the verb devoted, and that's quite a strong word, suggesting a close bond between two people. And of course, what she's trying to say here is that Halma is completely devoted to her, which might be quite slightly naive. Is that the case? But she's also understanding the fact that this devotion might not last forever. In other words, it might be transient, and there might be a time when he gets bored of her. And of course, that does allude to the fact that despite the middle-class facade and the happiness of Christmas time, which this play seems to present in the opening act, their marriage, as we know from the end, doesn't last forever, and therefore that transience actually becomes a reality. So in this case, there is a sense here that men and women seemingly seem to exist in separate spheres. The men in the macho world of finance and money and business, whereas the woman's domain is the home, looking after the children. So again, this role that she almost elects herself to have with Halma seems to show that binary between men and women. Also, in that conversation that she is having with Mrs. Lind, she also uses the repetition of the adjective free. And of course, here she means that the couple is financially free. Unlike last Christmas, where they had to scrimp and save, now she's saying that they have enough money because they are financially secure, and it means they don't have to worry about finances anymore when Torvald lost his job in the previous year. But of course, free can also mean something else in this play when we think of the end. And again, we've got that word foreshadows, which links to the fact that she becomes free at the end when she chooses to pursue her own freedom by walking out of the house. So free in this sense, in this act, means financially free. In other words, to have enough money that you don't have to live in poverty or make kind of careful decisions about your spending. But towards the end of the play, free, of course, takes on another meaning to emancipate yourself from the house in a democratic fashion, which Nora does. Nora as well mentions the fact that she plays with the children, and of course it's a typical depiction of female duty of the time. So while men work and earn the money in a respectable way, the women are left in home as caregivers, devoted to the home and the children. So it's again showing how men and women seem to exist in completely separate spheres at the time. And importantly, in yellow here, settings. Of course, settings are very important in this play, because the play is named after a particular setting, being the house. And the fact that we have the adjective beautiful here to describe that house suggests that this is all to do with facades and giving the artifice of something that's good, when actually the couple that live in that home is actually the relationship is full of secrets and lies. And as that play develops, of course, and we understand Krogstad's blackmail, that home begins to be replaced from being a beautiful place to a place of oppression and claustrophobia. And it also represents metaphorically the entrapping nature of marriage. So it's indulging there in facades. Again, I suppose the climax of that conversation that she has with Mrs. Lind in Act 1 is when she reveals her secret. And of course, she's not just revealing her secret to Mrs. Lind, she's also revealing that secret to us, the audience. And we remember then, for the rest of the play, what kind of situation that she's got herself into. So this conversation here, this discourse is created because she's frustrated that she has been called a child by Mrs. Lind. And it's also something that Halma would say. So this conversation, this passage here, is her trying to reinforce her potential for deception through using that phrase, big secret. And that secret, of course, is taking out the loan from Krogstad at a time when women were not supposed to have much financial control at all. This was a time, of course, when men handled all the money, and it was also a time of coverture, which means that any money a woman made, she had to turn over to her husband. So she's asking here two interrogatives, two questions. So what do you think of my big secret, Christine? Aren't I also capable of something? And those questions, those interrogatives show that she's trying to assert herself after being called a child and feeling relatively dismissed. So she's trying to rebel from this passive idea that women are just kind of superficial and aren't capable of anything more substantial. So again, it reinforces, like with the Macaroons, that this is a character who is capable of deception. In the yellow here, we have jargon and semantics and lexis, essentially all means the same thing, a group of words which are related to business and money. And of course, what she's trying to do is she's trying to assert her credibility with money. She is trying to give the impression that she knows what she's doing regarding the loan and being able to pay back Krogstad for this debt. Of course, this play is very much to do with money. Who has it? Who wants more of it? The issue with loans and secrets that creates. So money is often a driving force in this play. Of course, Mrs. Lind is only in the scene to begin with because she's looking for a job to earn money, because she's lived a decade of kind of destitution. So that's why she's there as well. So Nora's tone here suggests that she wants to be seen as being taking control, and she wants to be seen as knowledgeable about the business of handling money, which is obviously something that would exist in the man's domain. So she is resisting against patronising assumptions that she is a child. She also says, aren't I also? And of course, whenever you've got the word also, it means that they're trying to get parity with something. So what she's trying to say is, aren't I also capable of doing something despite my sex? So she's resisting against women just being kind of sidelined and the world of money and finance and business being exclusively for the men. So it links to that phrase when she talks about earning money. She says something like, it was almost like being a man, meaning she took control and she found it quite liberating that she could also earn money. Again, back to the beginning of the play, we've got these zoomorphisms when Halma consistently refers to her in terms of animals. So zoomorphism is the opposite of personification. So zoomorphism, it's when you give somebody kind of animal characteristics. And again, you've got that possessive determiner and the noun squirrel, but he does this with lots of birds as well. So sometimes I ask my students to circle all the examples of this in the first act. He probably thinks he's being affectionate. He probably thinks that he's being caring. But if you look at this from the perspective of the end of the play, you might also see this is quite patronising and quite controlling, as is calling somebody, I suppose, my doll. That has gone out of fashion recently because of these connotations. Of course, squirrels and also birds are cute, they're small, and therefore it seems to suggest that she is inferior to him and that she is there to be enjoyed because of her appearance, perhaps. The stage directions are something else that you should look at. And of course, for A Doll's House, this is a prose drama. So the stage directions are far more detailed than you would expect, for example, in a Shakespeare play. So the fact that the stage directions tell us at this point that she puts the macaroons in her bag and wipes her mouth suggests that she's hiding the fact that she's eating those sweets, and she is therefore capable of lying and creating deception. So the question that we also have as an audience is, what else is she hiding? So he's basically said to her, don't eat sweets, and she's disagreeing with that and eating them anyway. So that's clearly a form of rule breaking. She also talks about presents that she's bought. Of course, she has come back from buying Christmas presents. This is the time of Christmas, and Christmas is also known as the festival of the home. So it's no surprise that perhaps Ibsen has set this play at Christmas time, when you would expect a degree of unity and harmony between a family and members of that family, but that's of course not the case here. And of course, it's worth remembering that she hasn't got that money herself. It's money that Halma has probably given her in the same way that a parent gives pocket money to a child. So she's using money that she has been given from him to buy presents. She, remember, is a bit of a spender, and he is frugal. So in terms of money, they are contrasted quite quickly in terms of the opposites of each other. And from his office, and the office, of course, represents the world, the masculine world of business and finance, is where he does a lot of his work. She's not allowed in that office. So the door is closed, and doors, of course, are symbols of barriers, a place where Nora is forbidden to go. But it also shows again that he is a man of rules, do not disturb, spoken as an exclamative, meaning he might be shouting that from inside the office. We have to remember, of course, that this is her house too, and yet she seems to be forbidden from entering certain places. So that house begins to be out of bounds for her, at least in terms of certain rooms. Going forward, this is towards the end of the act, and this is, of course, after Krogstad has entered, and we know that Nora has taken this loan out, and Halma knows nothing about it. It's worth remembering, of course, why she took out the loan. She took the loan out to save Halma's life because he was ill, and the belief was that he needed to go down south to the warmer weather in order to survive. So that's why she took the loan out. She didn't take the loan out because she wanted a new bathroom or because she wanted to get her nails done. She took the loan out to save her husband's life out of duty to her husband, which of course is something that society would have said women should be responsible for. So falsifying signatures, of course, is fraud. It's forgery. And ironically, of course, we know as an audience that that's exactly what Nora has done. So any condemnation here that Halma labels Krogstad with also applies to Nora. The audience knows that, but Halma does not. And therefore, there is a high degree of dramatic irony at this point in the act. Halma, of course, used to be a lawyer. He's now a bank manager. So both of those roles are very much closely linked to honesty and morality. And one of the things I think that Halma gets credibility by in this play is the fact that he seems to be knowledgeable about rule breaking and moral behaviour and following moral codes. So this play is also concerned really with morality, and Dr. Rank is used as a character in this play to discuss moral behaviour. And of course, why she's asking this interrogative, mightn't he have done it out of necessity, referring to Krogstad, because she's trying to work out from him what would happen if she came clean to him about the fraud that she's also done by signing the IOU with her father's signature something like 3 days after he died. So she's trying to work out what would happen to her and if doing it out of necessity would mitigate the crime at all. The problem is, of course, is that Halma uses that noun man, suggesting there's a degree of societal double standards here, that despite him being a lawyer, that the idea that a man would be maybe treated differently to a woman. Notice, for example, he says man, not person. So does that mean that if he finds out a woman did this, it would be worse? Probably, because it goes against the rules of coverture, which is an affront to the man's role in terms of respectability. So there's some double standards here going on. Tricks and manoeuvres, of course, refers even to deceit, secrets and lies. And of course, that's what Nora has also done. For example, she has concealed the fact that she's having to pay back the loan by doing copying work in secret in the attic. She's told Halma that she's making Christmas decorations. She's not. She's actually finding ways to earn money in order to pay back this loan without Halma knowing. And in this play, like I said, there's always a strong comment on respectability and morals. And of course, if you are committing fraud, no wonder Halma says that that kind of person is eroded morally. And of course, that must also mean that he would think that Nora is eroded morally as well. And therefore, of course, she's listening to this information and going, he doesn't know it yet, but this must be also what he thinks about me if he knew. Of course, Halma intends to sack Krogstad from the bank because Halma is in charge of the staffing. Krogstad has said by this point, if Halma gets rid of me, you're coming down with me, meaning Nora. So it's in her interest to try and get Halma to keep him employed in the bank. And of course, as we know, that doesn't in fact happen. The final passage that I just want to look at for Act 1, and I'm not suggesting these are the only significant passages, but these are the ones that I certainly want to zoom in to for this video, is towards the end, and it's again concerned with morality. And I've also done a separate video of this about 2 years ago now, which would be in my A Doll's House playlist, which I annotate kind of in real time. But again, just to recap, that this is such an important passage because of the level of irony and dramatic irony here. Halma is criticising Krogstad, but actually he's also, without realising it, also criticising his wife. And therefore, from an audience perspective, the tension and the suspense begin to build, and that house gradually becomes more and more claustrophobic and oppressive. So wearing a mask, of course, is to do with facades and dishonesty and secrets, and that's, of course, what Nora is doing because she's lying to him. And then you get children, and if you're talking about political and social protest texts, children often are important character devices in those texts because they're used to show the sacrosanct nature of innocence and childhood. So what he's saying is, adults lying is bad enough, but if they get their children involved in those lies, or if they are lying in the presence of their children, it makes it worse. And of course, Nora kind of has done that because recently she was playing with the children. And from that point on, she doesn't actually spend time with them anymore because she's worried that her eroded morals are going to rub off on the children, and that will corrupt them as young people. You'll notice here that there is an asymmetry or an imbalance in the adjacency pairs. She only says one word in this passage, which is a question. And he really, again, dominates the conversation. So for dramatic methods, of course, for AO2, this is for AQA, it's important to think about who speaks the most and who hardly speaks. That can tell you something about the dynamic and the characterization at that time. So the reason why she asks him a question, of course, is because she's trying to find out the truth, but also she's elevating him to a position of knowledge because of the credibility that he has from being a lawyer and now a bank manager. In this play, there's also a continued semantic field to do with contagion and disease, and you can see here that I've highlighted it in yellow here. All these words are to do with decaying moral codes. Dr. Rank is also used as a kind of a figurehead in this play in Act 2 to discuss kind of morals and whether bad people should be given second chances. It's also believed metaphorically that his spine disability is to do with representing the eroded morals of his father, that in some respects Dr. Rank is having to pay the price of his father's eroded behaviour. So again, it's a continued reference in this play. And of course, what Halma is saying here is that lies in the home contaminate that home and turn it into something ugly. And of course, in blue, finally, we have those two nouns, home and house, suggesting that he's saying that the atmosphere of the home is almost sacrosanct. It must be protected because the home is a representation of morality and family. But of course, even though it's Christmas time, and even though that Christmas tree is decorated quite lovely in the beginning, it begins to become dishevelled. And that mirrors, of course, the quality of their marriage as the secrets and lies become out of control. So those are some passages from Act 1. Hopefully you found that useful in terms, particularly with highlighting the text, engaging with the text, annotating the text, with the idea to perhaps refer to some of this information in the exam. Of course, I wouldn't suggest, and neither does the examiner, that students should copy out all of these passages word for word, because that would be ridiculous. But it's about selecting carefully and judiciously which quotes and which words you want to refer to and discussing them as a way to further your interpretation of the question that you're given. Okay, so there'll be some other videos as well for Act 2 and Act 3, but this video was all concerned with Act 1 and the analysis of some passages in Act 1 of A Doll's House. Thank you very much for watching, and good luck with your studies. Thank you.